Thank you, Lucy, and thanks for having me here this morning. I'm Maggie Cawley. I serve as the Executive Director for OpenStreetMap US, and I will tell you today what that is and who we are. I'm based in Richmond, Virginia, so these virtual meetings are great because we get to travel. If you have a question and you don't want to forget it, you can always put it in the chat, and we'll get to that, and I'll try to save some time at the end as well. So I always like to ask raise of hands. It's hard to see everybody, but who's heard of OpenStreetMap in the room, in the virtual rooms? Hopefully everyone's raising their hands, especially since this is an ArcGIS user conference. OpenStreetMap's the world's largest editable, freely usable map of the world. It's a thriving community of contributors. At this point, we're over 8 million contributors to the map. It's a global schema. This is for GIS folks, this is great. You have the same schema from Tahiti to Tallahassee to Tennessee. So if you tag a road in Richmond, it's the same as in San Diego. It's a convening body. We're a big community, and working together globally requires a lot of collaboration. Here's some pictures of the global events that happen around the world. Like I said, it's a big community. Here's State of the Map Africa, State of the Map Europe. There's a picture of the Indonesian community there in the corner. Looks like a drone demonstration there in the other corner. It's used globally for disaster response, localizing data collection, and empowers local folks to collect their own data, especially in places that don't have state GIS. Government planning, a lot of countries use OSM as their base map. Uganda is a good example of that. Today, I want to talk about the U.S. community. Here's a map that shows some of the local communities: OpenStreetMap Salt Lake City, MapTime Baltimore. There's a really active New York community. Up in Seattle, they do a lot of meetups. And we use it for all different things as well. Conservation, equitable infrastructure, mapping sidewalks and pedestrian access, and also disaster response. There's community tasking to focus efforts. I'll provide some demos of this later as well. So this is how we collaborate and map together through some of these tools that have been developed over the almost 20 years since OpenStreetMap's been around. This is an example of Vermont Emergency Management Project that reached out to the OpenStreetMap community in the U.S. to help map buildings after the floods up there last year. We mapped 24,000 buildings to support that over just a few days. The Mendenhall Valley Facial Lake outburst flood created those tasks, and we mapped 3,000 buildings in 4 weeks to support those emergency management efforts. And this is the U.S. community. So here's a picture of our conference last year. We held it in Richmond, Virginia. Our State of the Map U.S. conference moves around every year. We've been in, our 14th, so 14 states. And this year we're going to Salt Lake City. We haven't been to North Carolina yet. So here's a few pictures of that event. Like I said, it drives public participation and decision-making. It provides that avenue for citizen engagement and data democracy. And as you know, our increasingly digital society, it reduces the costs and redundancy of data collection to enable the crowd to help you fill in your data gaps. You don't have to send your own folks out in the field to collect sidewalks and curb cuts. There's a community out there to do that. How does it all work? Since this is a GIS user group, I thought this might be interesting. So the data is collected. It's more than streets. Don't let the name fool you. And here's a few examples. These are some old statistics. I think there's more miles of sidewalks in there now and probably more cafes. And it's a key value system for the tagging. So you can dig into this a little bit more on some of the resource pages I'll share. But if you're going to tag a trail, highway equals path, you can add the operator, type of access. You probably get the point. So people add data. It's not just volunteer driven, but that's some of the most valuable data that we have is that very hyper local knowledge that gets added to the map, park benches, trees. Government and other entities, they provide authoritative data for import or bring it in themselves. Companies really leverage OpenStreetMap. They contribute data, they develop tools, and they monitor quality on a large scale. All of that goes into the database, and then it can be used by anyone. So humanitarian nonprofit organizations across the world, probably about 30,000 companies leverage OpenStreetMap in their products these days. If you've ever gotten an Amazon package, OpenStreetMap is behind those routing. Esri, big one. Tesla, Uber, Meta, Microsoft. Most of the big tech companies are leveraging OpenStreetMap data. You said governments, and then, Weather Map, New York Times, Washington Post. If you see a little eye in the corner, it's OpenStreetMap. So like I said, it either can come in from importing directly mapping features like the swimming pool above, or even now AI and machine learning generated data sets. So those building footprints can be identified much easier. A lot of times there has to be a conflation step and a validation step, and then it finds its way into the database. OpenStreetMap is not a GIS. It's a database. So it then finds its way into other places. So if you use Esri, you'll have the feature layers and the 3D. Most of that is built on OpenStreetMap. So if you haven't heard of it, you might already be using it though. Mapbox, QGIS, it's all leveraging OpenStreetMap data. The new Overture Maps data layer is mostly at this point built on OpenStreetMap. And then something else I'll talk about is those recreation apps. Here's kind of the more nerdy pages. If you're curious about how things are decided and tagged, sidewalks, each feature has its own page on our wiki. Descriptions, ways to map, examples. So if you feel like a deep dive, this is a good place to go. I pulled some examples from North Carolina, many different features. If you look at openstreetmap.org, it doesn't look that data rich, but you click on one of the features and here's an example of what might come up. All the different tags, like I said, the key value pairs, the name, the address, the phone number. In the recent years, a lot of people have been adding wiki tags, which has been great. Bus stops, you can see a lot of Raleigh's really well mapped. Even has the network there and the reference number to tie into that bus network. Trails and greenways are a big one. A lot of the OpenStreetMap community are also outdoor enthusiasts, so we tend to have really great outdoor data, trails and paths and bike lanes. How does it all get organized? Well, it's a very distributed ecosystem, but there are a few organizations doing their best to get people together and have that collaboration happen. Like I said, OpenStreetMap is a data set. It's not a map. It's open data. It's a public good. The OpenStreetMap Foundation is based in the UK, and they are the custodian for that database and the services necessary. So they're a nonprofit charity organization, and they raise money to keep those servers going. And OpenStreetMap US, we're an independent nonprofit. We steward the organization and the database in the United States, and we can focus on convening U.S. stakeholders. We were formed in 2010, and for the first 9 years, we were run by an all-volunteer board, and I came on 5 years ago as the first paid staff and executive director, I think, in the world. So it's been an interesting role, but we've been able to do a lot and create some programs and really get more engagement happening in the U.S. We kind of sit in the convener for all of the stakeholders, which include, the citizen volunteers, those communities I shared earlier, nonprofits and academia. OpenStreetMap's used a lot at universities. It's a great on-ramp to learning about geospatial, and it's a lot easier to dive into than an ArcGIS platform. So it's a good on-ramp for editing and getting folks interested in mapping. Government. We have a government working group I'll talk about, and increasingly working with folks like North Carolina Emergency Management to leverage the power of the crowd to help fill some data gaps and reduce the burden on state agencies. And then, like I said, the private sector. So we have meetings with all these groups and make sure that everything can work as smoothly as possible. So we have programs, Mapping for Impact, TeachOSM. I don't have time to go into all of these, but if you're curious about any, you can also check them out on our website. We build technology. So Field Papers is a fun one. It's an offline mapping tool. You print out a grid of your city, of whatever's already existing is there, and then you can go ahead out, do a street survey with a group, and there's a QR code in the corner, and you can scan that back in and go ahead and edit the data once you're back in your office or classroom. So that's a fun one that we do. And then public domain map is what I'll talk about. Charter projects, we act as a fiscal sponsor for open source software. So if there's a project out there that needs help fundraising or maintenance or strategy, they're welcome to apply to become one of our charter projects. We hold a lot of events online like this, but also, like I said, our annual in-person conference, State of the Map US. We're also part of something called Fed Geo Day. That's in DC in April. And we do a lot of Mappy hours. So if you're craving online map events, you're always welcome to join us there. We convene a lot of working groups. Our latest is the pedestrian working group. We have 7 now, and I'll talk about the government working group. Buzz through these. This was formed, it's kind of our long-standing working group. We had our 4-year anniversary, but we convene government at the state, local, municipal, and federal level to talk about challenges in open data and how we can create mutually beneficial relationships between the public and open data communities. These collaborations led to 2 of our projects, Public Domain Map and the Trail Stewardship Initiative. Real quick, I'll touch on Public Domain Map. So if you know about OpenStreetMap database, it's ODBL licensed. So this is a bridge database that improves interoperability between OpenStreetMap and federal data sets. It allows government agencies that are required to release their data in the public domain to collect data in the OpenStreetMap environment, have it reviewed, and then be able to use that data both in the public domain and in OpenStreetMap. So there's the workflow. I have a whole presentation about public domain maps. We won't go too deeply, but I do have a demo. If you want to see how it works, this is the tasking manager. This is a sidewalk mapping project. So there's that grid. You pick a grid, you map the task, and then you can go in there and start editing. There we go. So they're tasked with adding sidewalks. This is Salisbury, Maryland. But it could be any task. You could be adding buildings. You could be adding streetlights, benches. And they're going to go ahead and map both sides of the street, tag it as a sidewalk. And there's a lot of great pre-filled attributes here. You could put the width, the surface type. You could tag it, connect it to the rest of the infrastructure. There's all kinds of backgrounds you can choose to map. Like I said, our tools have really evolved over the years. And that's a sidewalk being added. Very excited to announce we're about to launch a mapping project with North Carolina Emergency Management to update buildings in Cumberland County. So stay tuned for that. We'd love to get involved in mapping that. It is a pilot, so we've been working through a couple of fixes on the tool side, but we will be filling those gaps and sharing that link out hopefully with your community and maybe doing a workshop in the future. The other project I'll touch on is our Trail Stewardship Initiative. So like I mentioned, OpenStreetMap is used in all of the trail apps that you might use in hiking, recreation. And those companies don't necessarily update the data themselves. So they render it pretty much straight from the database. And sometimes they might highlight trails that aren't necessarily authoritative or where people or the Park Service might want them to walk. So OpenStreetMap launched an initiative to update the tags behind the trails, make sure that they match what is on the ground and where land managers want them to go. We are developing tagging guidelines and getting the government, the mappers, and those private companies in the room. So it's been a really great initiative. We've come up with a standard tagging schema, detailed tagging schema for the ambitious, and a rendering guideline for those companies like All Trails and Gaia, who this is a before and this is an after. So we updated those taggings, and then they re-rendered their data based on what we did and what our guidance was. And you see a big difference here. We launched a campaign in Utah to update all of the public lands trails. So hopefully we'll finish that within the next decade, hopefully by the end of the year. But really, it improves safety. It keeps people off of dangerous trails, keeps people off that really sensitive ecosystems, and knowing surface types and the types of trails before you go creates more equitable access to our natural treasures. This is what we're doing in Utah. We're piloting workflows and campaign stewardship and stakeholder engagement. If you're interested in this, let me know. We're always looking for people to join our working group, and we're starting out with Bryce Canyon. If you're interested in mapping, those tasks are up on our tasking manager as well. What do I got? A minute. Here's a quick workflow. Let's see, you can put the width of the trail in there, add the access. Say if there's horses allowed on it. This is all preset. And then one that's really important for a lot of people is if you're allowed to bring your dog, because people will make that decision before they go to the trail, right? So this is the Trail Stewardship Initiative. We're doing all this using the reference data from that park. So Bryce Canyon pointed us to the website. So this is where we're looking for that reference data, and then we're putting that in OpenStreetMap. This is a lot of work. So we're looking to pilot the Digital Trail Stewards program to create ambassadors around the country that help with that management and a point of contact. Here's some ways to get involved in the Trails Initiative. We also have our conference coming up. So if you're interested in getting over to Utah, please join us in June. And here's some other ways to get involved in OpenStreetMap US. Thanks again for having me here. Sorry that was a lot of stuff, but hopefully I gave you enough to ask a few questions, and feel free to contact me if we don't get to what you want to talk about. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maggie. I did have a question for you. Just as you were there is a little poll popped up if people can fill that out while we're doing questions. But I know OpenStreetMap has just such an incredible community of volunteers. Do you have an idea of how many volunteer mappers you have?
There is actually a statistics page on that wiki. And, I think I said 8 million. It's probably up to 9.
Yeah,
in the US, we host the OpenStreetMap US Slack channel, and we have about 7,000 people there. But I know it's not nearly the number of folks actually mapping in the country.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We did actually have a question come in chat from John Lay. He wants to know, how does a local community or government participate in the program and get involved with OpenStreetMap? Provide data.
How do you get involved with OpenStreetMap?
Yeah.
You could go
more as like a local government organization rather than like an individual, if that helps.
We do have our government working group. If you'd like to join that, you're welcome. We're always having new members. It really depends on the needs. There's a lot of government out there using the data differently. In Portland, TriMet uses it to route all of their buses, and they're using it as their whole back end for a lot of their transportation system. Gregory mentioned that Kendall County in Illinois is using it for a lot of their data. To instead of maintaining their own database, they're using OpenStreetMap for that, saving them time. But yeah, I can drop a link if that helps it.
Yeah, I know NCDOT has definitely looked at contributing data, and I think that we were able to figure out like how to do that in a consistent way. If folks haven't had a look at OpenStreetMap before, I haven't looked at it in a couple of years, but I found it a little bit, I was a little bit like, oh, this is a bit different. I'm not used to this schema. I'm not used to this database, but there's just such a wealth of information there, and it's so worth just taking the time and familiarizing yourself with different data that you might be interested in looking at. Can see a couple of hands raised. I don't know if those are from earlier. We've got Alana and Gregory. Did you guys have questions or just had our hands raised for maybe that first prompt?
Yes, it was kind of a follow-up of the previous question. I think the question was asked from John Lay was like, what does the process look like if they wanted to have like a scope out of a pilot similar to what North Carolina Emergency Management's doing? Like, what kind of process does that look like for them?
Thank you, Gregory. Well, it depends on how you want the data. If you want to create tasks in OpenStreetMap itself, we allow anyone with we can make administrator privileges for folks to use our tasking manager. I dropped that link, and you can set up your own tasks there. If you go in and explore, you'll see a lot of people do. If you need the data to be in public domain, that's going to be something you'd have to work with my team on, because we have to do all the back end work to set that up. But we definitely could talk about that. So just reach out to me if you're interested in doing that.
Excellent.
Alana, did you have a question?
Nope, that hand just disappeared. I did see William Brown just has a comment here. He says, I mainly use it to make corrections, edit to data within our jurisdiction that appears on base maps used by other services. Yeah, that's feels very valid to me. It's a good way to, be able to have a say. Alrighty. If we don't have any more questions, I think if Melanie, if you could queue up your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Maggie. That was great. Thank you.